Hi and welcome to Debt Tale. This is Rebecca Bautista and welcome to the first book review. Today's book that we'll be reviewing is called My Money, My Way. And I'm going to be rating this book on a few categories from a score of 1 to 5. To keep this video on the shorter side, you can click right up there for a video on the categories and what goes into the consideration. So let's get started. All right, so we'll be talking about... So this book was written by the budget mom, aka Kumiko Love. If you haven't heard of her, there will be a bunch of links in the description below, so check it out. There's also going to be a link to this book if you're interested. So the book itself is only 212 pages and it is broken down into a total of 13 chapters. 2 of those chapters are kind of like the introductory pieces, and then the rest of that book is broken down into 2 parts. The first part is build a new foundation, and then the second part is make it happen. Generally, I'm a pretty fast reader, but now that I have kids, it's kind of hard for me to take time to read. So I've been reading this book anytime my husband's been driving. The score I would give this is a 4. There were some bits about how her followers applied the advice. I thought it was beneficial to include. However, it was quite a bit of it, so in that sense it was a little bit more on the fluffiness, but it definitely gave more of a word count to the book. It was easy to put down and pick back up without having to reread a bunch, and that is a perk in my mind because it's really easy to get resituated. That just saves you time. So if you're like me, who you have to put the book down and then come back, you don't feel lost. Now let's get on to is it broad or narrow category. This book is really geared towards women, so I want you to keep that in mind for my male viewers out there, that this might not be a book that you would want to read. It is something that is definitely her target niche audience, and so it's a narrow book by design. But I will say and give her kudos, she does talk about variable pay, which is not something I found in other books. They just mention it really briefly, but then they don't talk about it. In this book, they actually gave a couple of examples of like a restaurant worker, and that's a really nice, because that's a very common side hustle that people end up doing. Another thing that was nice is that there was good advice for a bunch of other situations, and it was just kind of like sprinkled throughout, but it wasn't very like its own section. So for the broad and narrow category, I would give it a 4. I thought it was niche down again towards women, and I thought it did a good job in trying to encompass different scenarios within that. However, I just felt like it could have had a little bit more dedication towards different scenarios within that niche category. What bumped it up for sure was talking about variable income. All right, let's get on to the next one, which is it actionable? I think this book does a great job at giving you some easy steps and some visual ways of categorizing your debt and ways that utilizes her products. However, you can tweak it and you can modify it on your own. In fact, she even mentions a couple of good tips on how to use it yourself, by yourself, without buying her products, which I think is nice. Some chapters end with a nice recap and essentially a list of things to do at the end of the chapter. For people who aren't familiar with the budget mom, I think this is helpful. However, I am familiar with her work, and so therefore I would give it a 4 because it gives a good general idea. It wasn't really anything new or earth-shattering, and it wasn't in as much detail as I think some people would appreciate. Would I buy it? I borrowed this book from the library because I made 2022 a year in which I wasn't buying books. Now, I'm familiar with the budget mom's ways. I have some of her older products. I read her blog posts here and there. I'm still in her Facebook group. So because I'm familiar with this, I rate this a 3. I might buy it, but only if it was on sale. Like, I love Kumiko's work, so I want to still support her, but I personally wouldn't be utilizing this book and going back to it as a reference. Would I lend it out to someone? Yeah, sure. Someone who isn't familiar with her work. All right, so let's recap this book. In total, out of 20 points, this book got 15, so 75%. If you're a woman who's not familiar with the budget mom and you're into reading about personal finance, then I would 100% recommend this book. If you don't like reading about personal finance, but you want a book to kind of like jumpstart your conversation about money and money skills, then I still would recommend this. Now, if you're a woman who is already familiar with the budget mom, then I would say borrow it before you buy it. Only you can decide whether or not you would go back to perusing it. If you're a guy, I would say maybe read this, but again, warning, it's written for women, especially those with kids. So for some single guys out there, this might not be the book for you. What I will say that this book did a really, really great job was talk about some of the money mindset issues and some of the reasons why people have feelings of guilt and shame towards money and how they utilize money. And I think that is beneficial for anybody because it's relatable across the board. I don't think I've ever met a person who didn't have some type of money shame. So yeah, that's it for My Money, My Way. For those who are familiar with the budget mom, I would say borrow it. For those who aren't familiar with it, I would say buy it. It's still a good book. Again, I'm familiar, but if I find it on sale, I'll probably buy it because again, I do like her products. I like her message. I like the work that she does, and so I still want to show my support. So that's it for now.